you. Richard Fuller, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question about agricultural land value and biodiversity net gain and some of the evidence provided on Statement 3 on renewable energy infrastructure. And as I reviewed it, it said that agricultural land value should not be the predominant test in site selection, confirming that, and that it should be acknowledged, secondly, that there is an inverse relationship between agricultural land value and biodiversity net gain. Could you, sort of in the layperson's term, just tell us what your thinking is for making that confirmation and statement about the inverse relationship, and what your expectation is about how the MPS can be clarified to take account of your points?
I'm going to ask Mr. Phillips to just lead off on this, on the particular clarification that you're seeking.
Thank you, Jan. What we're talking about here is agricultural land classification. So farming land across the UK is generally subjected to a test that works out whether or not it's best and most versatile for crop production. Generally speaking, if the classification is closer to 1, so if it's 1, 2, 3A, it's categorised as best and most versatile, so the most productive, and then 3B, 4, 5 is sliding down the scale into that which isn't particularly productive. When we look at biodiversity net gain, the inverse relationship we're talking about is that the more intensively farmed land has been, it tends to be when you take it out of that production and you then have an appropriate management, land management technique that introduces particular types of grasses, wildflowers, etc., you get a very high biodiversity net gain yield. So the more intensively it's been farmed, the higher the percentage of biodiversity net gain when it's moved across. The inverse of that is where land has not been intensively farmed because it's generally poor quality, it already has perhaps been laid fallow, not used over time, and so natural habitats have created, and so the existing baseline for the land is quite high in terms of biodiversity, and therefore the net gain that's achieved by moving that land across into, say, solar production with net gain there is a lower amount. So that's one dynamic of it. I think in terms of agricultural land not being the predominant test, the reason for this is that when one is doing site selection for solar, first of all, you have to consider the irradiation levels, so where are you going to find the resource. You then need to consider how you're going to connect to the grid and where is the available grid transmission connection capacity, and then you have to find the land. Not all landowners will be willing to have solar or any other type of development on their land, so you have to find those that are willing to do that. So those are the three crucial tests in when you're starting off positioning a solar. As part of that, you then should consider the alternatives. So if you've got two parcels of available land, one is top quality agricultural land, the other is poorer quality, then yes, as part of the design of the project, one should be driven towards the poorer quality land. So that's acknowledged. But it shouldn't be the predominant test, and I think there should be greater clarity in the MPS and direction given over. If you're an inspector and you're trying to work out what the recommendation is, you say, well, I understand it's not the predominant test, but how much weight should I put on this? And that then needs to be considered in the context of wider policy, like the rewilding payments that are being given to farmers at the moment to take land out of agricultural production and turned into new habitats for particular types of ecology, and think, well, if that's the direction of policy towards farming, agriculture, building back a green economy, and so on, then can't we say more in the MPS about how solar projects can actually work alongside that? Because the resounding objection to solar at the moment is more about loss of agricultural land than it is about landscape and visual impact. So that needs to be clarified. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.